Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Caretakers for this evening. My name's Dana Shoaf, and I'm the speaker for this evening. And some of you may know me from the Civil War Faces group, and of course, some of you may know also that I'm the editor of Civil War Times magazine. I'm really humbled that Doug York asked me to do this because compared to many of you out there, my collection is really meager. And I know some of you have absolutely stupendous collections, and they're really breathtaking. I don't really have anything like that, but I hope I have a few things you'll find interesting and you know, get something out of. I'm running this through Zoom because I scanned my images and I wanted to share my screen. And I was trying to do it from my home computer, and it wasn't working. And so I've run it through the Civil War Times Zoom page, which Melissa Wynn, my director of photography, has helped launch. So it took us a while to get going, and I apologize for that. But it's sort of an odd sensation to be thinking about talking about myself and my collection for an hour. So I hope I can make it at least somewhat interesting for everyone. And Doug graciously suggested that I actually spend some time talking about Civil War Times magazine. It was, you know, something that he suggested to me, so I said I would. And I've got the most recent issue here. This is our June issue, and it was we're working on our August issue right now, and this issue has done really well. And so just a little bit of background. Most of you are at least aware the publication exists, but I've worked for this company for 20 years, believe it or not. I can't believe it, for about 20 years. And I've been the editor of Civil War Times for, it's close to a decade now. And we also publish America's Civil War magazine, sort of a sister publication. And people always ask, why do you have two Civil War titles? It's just smaller companies coming together. And the demand for Civil War information is so strong that both these magazines have a strong subscriber base. And actually, until the pandemic, we did really well on the newsstand too. It's interesting because, you know, you have magazines like Time and Newsweek that are no longer published, but Civil War Times has been around for 58 years at least. Well, it actually started in the late 50s, but the magazine form that you know has been around for 58 years. And America's Civil War has been around for a couple decades at least. I can't remember, to be quite frank. Both magazines are still profitable even in this day and age, when publishing is a really tough row to hoe. And we have a really dedicated subscriber base that keeps us going. And hopefully when this pandemic's out of the way, we'll get back onto the newsstand. But I've followed a philosophy since I took over the magazine to try to distill some of the most recent academic scholarship into through the magazine for a wide audience. A lot of books get published by professors, whatnot, and you know, a lot of people aren't aware of them actually. And so I try to do that as much as I can, and also maintain a popular feel to the magazine. I don't want it to be intimidating to anybody. That's why we don't have footnotes, because I think footnotes, I think magazines should be aspirational. I think this magazine should be something that everyone from a PhD to someone that's just getting interested in the Civil War should feel comfortable reading. And so we've discussed, you know, that's one of the reasons we don't have notes in the magazine. We get them in-house and we vet the stories and we check things out there, but we don't, it's a conscious decision not to publish them. And one of the things that I've also done is, because I like photography, and I'm going to show you some of my photographic collection here, is I've tried to incorporate photography in the magazine in a number of different ways. And one of the departments we have is called Details, where we take an image. This is a USCT camp near Fredericksburg, and actually on the horizon you can see Confederate pickets. So there's opposing forces in the same image, which is really remarkable. And we try to find an interesting image and pull details out. in every issue. And then we have a news section, and not too long ago, we started a Warframe, because Military Images, fantastic publication you're all familiar with. We're never going to ever go in that direction, but in our grazing section, as we call it in the beginning, we now publish a cased image every time. We call Warframe, and we mix it up between Federal and Confederate. And then throughout the magazine itself, I try to intersperse. You might see some of my bullets a little bit later on tonight. Material culture, fancy word for good, cool stuff. And you know, there's a nice overcoat and Federal overcoat blanket and brogans. And then we have a department that finishes the magazine called Sold, which focuses on a piece of material culture. This is actually a gem type set into a piece of bone by a guy in the 5th New York Heavy Artillery. So because of my interest in the stuff of the Civil War and everything, I do try to mix that into the magazine. And, you know, so far so good, right? I get a lot of feedback from people, and folks still seem to enjoy the magazine. So if you're interested in subscribing, historynet.com is the website you can go to, take a look. And also, while I'm doing this pitch plug here, we have a Facebook Live we do the first Monday of every month called First Mondays. Melissa Wynn and I, Melissa's director of photography, as I said, we go to some interesting Civil War place and try to bring a human interest story and talk about some details. And we started a Zoom interview as well the first Thursday of every month. And our first subject for that was actually collector Charles Joyce. And we looked at his Federal Gettysburg material. In July, Chuck is going to join us again to look at his Confederate Gettysburg material. And in June, Susanna Earle, some of you may be aware of, is going to be discussing the Texas Brigade, which is her area of study, and some of the new things that she's also working on. So we have digital components in too as well. So just to wrap briefly up about myself, I live in Maryland, very close to Middletown, Harpers Ferry, Antietam. Gettysburg is not far away. I love living here in the midst of this Civil War country. I've always considered myself a historian first and a journalist second when it comes to this, because my mother passed along her love of history to me, and literally read bedtime stories about history to me, and I grew up sort of imbued with that. And then in first or second grade, maybe, the American Heritage Golden Book of the Civil War came out. Actually, my parents purchased a copy for my cousin and for Christmas, and I read it and dog-eared it. And so they went out and bought another one to give to him and gave me the copy and that was sort of it. That book, for many of us, I know, put us on this perilous path of Civil War fascination, those little maps, great imagery. And, you know, growing up in the afterglow of the centennial, I just was hooked. And then living in Western Pennsylvania, where I grew up, Gettysburg wasn't far away. And I think what I'm going to try to do now is share my screen, and hopefully you'll all be able to see what I want to show you here. And I am going to max my screen out here so you don't have to look at me, and you can look at hopefully neat images. And let me go back to that actually. So this is one of my interests is the 134th Pennsylvania, which is a 9-month regiment. And I'm interested in 9-month regiments from Pennsylvania to begin with, because these guys join up for 9 months, but they join up at not a great period of time during the Civil War. You know, the Peninsula Campaign has ended. August is 1862 is when these guys are formed, I should say. The Peninsula Campaign has ended. The Northern Republic is very aware that this is not going to be a short little war anymore. And there's sort of almost a sense of desperation. We got to infuse the army with some fresh troops, and we don't think that this 3-year enlistment is going to fly, and that if we offer these guys 9 months enlistment, maybe we can, you know, infuse the military, the Army of the Potomac particularly, with new soldiers. Governor Andrew Curtin is a big supporter of Abraham Lincoln in the war effort. So Pennsylvania provides a number of these 9-month regiments. And my great-grandfather and my great-uncle served in the 134th Pennsylvania. And my great-grandfather was named George Washington Cameron. And it was a fairly common name at the time, really. And then my great-uncle was named Basleal Cameron. And Basleal is a name out of the Bible. And so some of these 9 months regiments, guarded bridges, didn't do a whole lot. Some saw quite a bit of action, and the 134th Pennsylvania made a really dramatic charge at Fredericksburg, the last attack on the stone wall at Fredericksburg, and they got chopped up pretty badly doing that. And Basleal was a corporal. Both men belonged to Company A, and Basleal took a projectile, shell fragment, bullet, something, and he was mortally wounded and died a couple days after the battle at Fredericksburg at a field hospital. And so my mom told me that story a lot when I was growing up. And, even as a kid, I thought, man, if great grandpa George Washington had been hit, I wouldn't be here. And it sort of gave me a sense of connection to the Civil War. And of course, my grandfather was his son, and my grandfather's oldest sister was alive. And I talked to her a lot because I remember her telling me stories about how they threw his old uniform away because it was moth-eaten, and it made me cringe. And there was nothing in the house left of his related to the military, and that he had fought at Gettysburg, which wasn't true, but that he had fought at Gettysburg, and that his favorite general was McClellan. And at the time, I'm like, McClellan, that guy, not that great. Come on, he had the slows, right? So my opinion of McClellan has changed over time. And I look back and I'm like, well, when my great-grandfather served under McClellan, Burnside, and Hooker, right? Maybe McClellan is not the worst, is the best of the lot. But there actually was something in the old homestead. There was an auction, and a U.S. belt plate came out of the house at the auction. And due to dysfunctional family stuff, I wasn't at the auction, and it's gone. So I still really regret that. But I was able to eventually purchase this image, which was taken in Newcastle, Pennsylvania on August 16th, 1906. It's a reunion of the 134th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. I think it may be at Cascade Park, which was a major park in Newcastle. Newcastle is a Rust Belt town at this point, and Cascade Park is long closed and and not like it used to be at all. But I was at a show and I saw this, and it was 134th Pennsylvania. On the back, there's a sticker from CV's studio, which was a major photography studio in Newcastle through the 20th century. And then I started to look closely, and based on some other images I had, I could find my great-grandfather right here, George Washington Cameron, sort of peeking around this guy in front of him. And here's some other images of him. I don't own these. These are photocopies, but you can see this is the same fellow. And that was a while ago. That was when I was a graduate student in high school, and college, I should say. And I believe I bought this at the Mansfield Relic Show in Ohio when I was in graduate school. And I couldn't afford much. And for a long time, there was sort of a lull in my collecting interest, and it really has picked back up within the past few years. But there's a few things I picked up along the way. So I am always grateful that I have this depiction of my great-grandfather. And I love this photograph of him, post-war image of him with the horse. And I was out on this property a lot when I was a kid. And it was just really cool to go out there and think about him. And think about him marching off the war and coming back, thankfully, in Basleal not. This is the best I could find. And I can't tell if that says 134th or not. It might have been a combined reunion, But I have a reunion ribbon I'm going to show you later on from the 134th that I think is really nice. But I'd surely love to find one from this 1906 reunion as well. So, you know, monetarily, it's not the most valuable item, but this is a really important piece of my collection to me because it's an obvious connection. And then recently, Chuck Joyce actually sold me this stereo view, which I think was really kind of him. And this is a stereo view of, shows the area of, at Fredericksburg, the plain in front of Mary's Heights and the stone wall where the 134th Pennsylvania attacked. And the, this is actually a pretty rare image, actually. And this is the Stratton House that you see here. This was the fairgrounds area. This is a corner of a, I'm not sure if this is the Ebert house or an outbuilding on the Ebert farm, which was along the road here as well. And you see the stone wall here in the foreground. That stone wall is an extension of the stone wall at the sunken road, because I'll show you a map in a minute that the stone wall sort of curved and went toward the town of Fredericksburg itself. And the 134th Pennsylvania was part of Major General Andrew Atkinson Humphrey's division of the 5th Corps. And the 134th was in a brigade commanded by Brigadier General Erastus Tyler. And the other brigade commander, oh gosh, I can't think of his first name in that division, but it was Allebach was his last name. And that division charged right across this ground. Other divisions did as well. But they charged right across this ground as they headed toward the sheets of gunfire and cannon fire from the Confederate defenses there at the sunken road and the heights behind. And, you know, he told me he had this, and he said, you know, if you're interested in, you know, I would sell this to you. And I was really happy to have this. And I think that's one of the great things about the collecting community is that once people understand what you're interested in, you know, they can kind of guide you to things like this. And it's just really fulfilling. And when I got this, I sort of had this mental flash drive of my grandfather's image. And I don't know what my great uncle looked like. I've never seen a photograph. And this patch of ground. And I almost could visualize him, you know, rushing across here, trying to avoid getting killed. On the back of this stereo view, it's even more, you know, another fantastic thing about it is it has this writing. And it says, Stonewall looking towards Fairground, noted at the Battle of Fredericksburg, which is cool enough in itself. And then underneath that in pencil, it is written, and this had to be written by a veteran. This is to the right of where we lay. The wounded who crawled to this large brick house beggar all descriptions, so I was told. And, you know, if you go back to the stereo view itself, this is sort of the front of the Stratton house. So if the attack is going this way, across toward Mary's Heights, you know, this is part of the area where the 134th ran across a swale, and there were all these wounded and terrified survivors or wounded men of previous attacks on the sunken road. So Humphreys has these guys go in. They are ordered not to stop and fire. They go in loaded but not capped, if I recall correctly. And they're like, don't stop and shoot, just get to the wall. This is the first major engagement for the 134th. It's the last major attack. These guys are green troops. And, you know, when you do something the first time, you really don't know what you're getting into. So off they go and they make this attack. And even Confederates talk about this massive block of Union soldiers and the order and the formation that they held as they went across the open ground, because they don't know what they're going to get into. When they reached this area around the Stratton house where all these wounded men were, there was a swale. And as they rush across there, soldiers lying there are grabbing them and tackling them and saying, don't go forward, you're going to get killed, turn around, stop, go back. It breaks the momentum of the attack. Both brigades begin to stop and open fire. And, you know, they suffer very much the same fate as the other Federals that attacked the sunken road. They're blasted back, and with great casualties. And there's they were tearing stretchers off of houses to use as impromptu, tearing shutters off of houses to use as impromptu stretchers. And I could just imagine maybe my great uncle Basile being put on one of these stretchers. But so there's the back with this amazing writing. And then just to give you a quick perspective, it's kind of maybe hard to understand. The Stratton House is under this blob for the 155th Pennsylvania Volley Box Brigade. That stone wall section we were looking at is right through here. Right through here. And there's the Stratton House. The Ebert House is out of sight under this regimental marker. And this is, of course, the sunken road. And the stone wall turned and ran down toward Fredericksburg. So you see Humphrey's division, and 134th PA is the right front regiment, and they would have gone right along that stone wall, maybe on both sides of it, I'm not sure. But certainly you can imagine their right flank sort of grazing that stone wall as they head toward the Innes House, which still survives and is just bullet riddled if you ever happen to go to Fredericksburg when it's open. So when I got that stereo view and put it together with some maps, it just really was another strong connection for me. And, you know, I'm glad that what I have in my collection, at least a lot of these things tell stories that really relate to me. And I think anyone out there that collects has that same sense of trying to build stories that help you connect. You can see these dotted lines here. This is where the swale was, where all those, I believe this is the indication of the swale was where there were a lot of lying men that disrupted the momentum of this attack. So that's through my mom to my great grandfather and those stories that really helped keep drawing me into the Civil War as I was growing up. And I'm glad as I was getting older that I was able to purchase something that connects him so concretely to the battle, and also a picture involving him, the reunion picture. This is a real recent acquisition of my collection. And this is Robert Carruthers of 134th Pennsylvania. And I purchased this from Britt Eisenberg. And Britt posted it on Civil War Faces, and I messaged him and I said, oh my God, you know, would you sell me this image? I've never had a chance to purchase a uniformed image of a man in the 134th Pennsylvania. And he said, sure, to my everlasting delight. Robert Carruthers was from Beaver County, Pennsylvania, the county south of where I grew up. And this photograph was taken at Arlington Heights, Virginia in August 1862. The 134th and a lot of these 9-month guys came in August of 62. And they were out of the Army, out of the military in May of 63 after the Battle of Chancellorsville. Just give you a quick regimental history, very quick. The 134th is not engaged in Antietam. Humphrey's division's in Frederick, and makes this really actually pretty epic march that rivals A.P. Hill's march from Harper's Ferry to get to Sharpsburg on the evening of the 17th to reinforce McClellan's men. They make this march, and Humphreys writes very proudly that there is very little straggling. And if you've been in this area, you know there's some mountains you have to cross to get there. There's some hills. And these guys march through Middletown, which is not far from where I live. And, you know, thinking of, I'm living here now, and my relatives march through Middletown is really something as well. But I was thrilled with this image because it's not just a cool image of 134th guy. It's a cool image. You know, there's this beautiful backdrop here with this covered wagon. It's just fantastic. And so now, you know, if the documentation is right, and I don't have any reason to believe it wouldn't be, I'm going to keep an eye out for this backdrop, because who knows, you know, could be some other 134th guys in front of this backdrop. But if you're into material culture, cool stuff like I am, there's a number of things about this image, you know, that I think are really neat. His belt buckle is upside down because he's reversed it so that his accoutrements look correct in the image. He's wearing dark blue trousers, which I had no idea what the 134th looked like. I figured they had sky blues like everybody else. I'm not sure every company had dark blue trousers, but just to see that there were even some in the regiment is really cool, because that's usually an earlier war association. His crossbelt plate is gone, although you could see the two holes where it would go. And I'm like, how did you lose your cross belt? You haven't been in the Army very long, you know? Did you never get it issued? Did you somehow, in fact, lose it? Did you get rid of it? You know, he was probably going to get docked some pay because he didn't have his cross belt plate if, in fact, he was issued one. And the coolest thing is he's carrying an Austrian Lorenz. And I think if you look along here, if I'm looking at this correctly, and if he's reversed everything, then you can see this little line here, and I think that's the cheek piece. Some of them had cheek pieces and some of them didn't, but I think this is a Lorenz with a cheek piece. But of course, the Austrian Lorenz was the second most imported firearm after the Enfield. And some soldiers liked it, some didn't like it. And they had, I think it has a really cool bayonet. It's a quadrangle bayonet, and it's just a different looking gun. And I've actually already gone out and purchased one because I wanted one, and a friend of mine had it and sold it to me very reasonably. And at least I have a example now. It's not worth showing because, you know, it's just a typical Lorenz, but the fact that at least some members of the 134th carried these imports was a really interesting revelation for me. The documentation on this particular image too, I really love, because this is an old note card, and you can see the date 1580, which I believe is January 5th, 1880. And this is information or an instruction for somebody, a photographer or someone like that, to turn this into one of those larger painted photographs that you see, these post-war images. And so it gives the information, a lot of information about Robert Carruthers right here. Hair dark brown, eyes light blue, complexion very light, full figure as is in small picture. In other words, full standing. They wanted a full standing replication. Clothes blue. And then someone else has written Robert Carruthers, 134th Regiment PA Volunteers, in this picture taken 1862 August at Arlington Heights, Virginia. And it's just, I can't wait till the National Archives opens up again. He's got a pension file down there. I've already found that out. And I want to go find out more about him. And there's some nice little subtle tinting here on his cheeks, buttons, and a little bit on his belt plate too. And a little bit of green back here in the mountains. So I really love this image. And again, it connects, you know, it's a 134th piece. This is a carte de visite I bought a couple years ago at the Washington photo show, the DC photo show. This is Erastus B. Tyler, a brigadier general that commanded my relative's regiment through Antietam, Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville. And Tyler did not get along with Andrew Atkinson Humphreys, and that's sort of a story for another day. But Tyler is one of these, he's a fairly, I would say, obscure Union brigadier general. You don't hear a lot about him, but he was a fur trader, fur trapper before the war in Ravenna, Ohio. And so he then becomes involved with the Federal Army, and when these 9-month regiments, he served in Western Virginia, led the 7th Ohio. He was the first colonel of the 7th Ohio Infantry, and eventually gets the brigadier general. And when these 9-month regiments are raised, he is put in charge of my relative's brigade. And this is a cool, I saw this and snapped it up because I like Tyler. He also, late in the war, plays an often overlooked role in the Battle of Monocacy. He will help hold the retreat route open for the Federal troops to get back into Baltimore. And he leads 100 Days Men out of Baltimore. He give you just a thumbnail history of him because he's kind of interesting. He and James Garfield, a future president, of course, go at it for the colonelcy of the 7th Ohio in 1861. And Tyler wins that election. And it was picked up in the newspapers as almost a political debate. Tyler's a Democrat, Garfield's a Republican. And so it really takes on the spirit of a political competition. But Tyler wins, and Garfield writes that Tyler used bargains and brandy to get the colonelcy of the 7th Ohio. Fast forward to the post-war years when Garfield is president. Tyler is the postmaster of the city of Baltimore. You know, he commanded the city defenses of Baltimore after his 9-month brigade was disbanded. And that's why he was at the Battle of Monocacy. And anyway, Tyler basically does what we would call sexual harassment. He harasses a female clerk in the post office. It's picked up in the Baltimore papers. It's a huge scandal. It runs in the papers for a long time. And guess who calls Tyler to Washington to personally relieve him of his postmastership? James Garfield, right? So who wouldn't like to be a fly on that wall when Garfield gets to finally best his old rival from the Civil War years? But Tyler, as a commander, I think he served well. His men seem to like him. And what's really cool about this CDV, if you could just make it out, it says the best brigadier general in the Army on here. And when I saw that, I'm like, I wonder, you know, this has to be written, in my mind anyway, by a 9-month guy, because they liked him, they hated Humphreys, and Tyler ran interference for them a lot to try to make their lives easier. And they all seem to like him. And so, you know, you never know who wrote it exactly, but I just think that's a great anecdote on the back of this CDV related to the 134th Pennsylvania. Then I want to take a series of, take a look at a series of letters here, if I can find the letters, because I don't want to read the entire series of letters to you, but Mike Krause, a fellow collector, sold these to me years and years and years ago. They're all connected to the 134th Pennsylvania, and they tell a little bit of a story involving a soldier in Company H of the 134th Pennsylvania named Harvey Dinsmore. He was a sergeant in Company H. This letter is written to Harvey on September 21st, 1862 by his sister, Kristen Hopper. And these guys, I believe, are from Lawrence County, where I grew up. I didn't check that, honestly, to double check that. It's been a while, but so she writes this letter after the Battle of Antietam, and there's sort of a very worried tone in this letter. And she says, "Dear brother, it is with great anxiety of mind that I take my seat to write you tonight. We fear you may not be well. A friend had come home." I'm kind of chopping this up, but she said, I was told your company had arrived on the battlefield to help surround General Jackson. And of course, that tells you how deep in the North the legend of Stonewall Jackson had penetrated by this time. And she goes on to say that, you know, I have no doubt that you have been in some hard fighting and may be killed or wounded or a prisoner, but I trust and hope it is not so. We have good news that our army has gained a great victory and has taken 10,000 prisoners, including General Jackson and Lee. Not quite, Kristen. Actually, it says Kristen is her name. Not quite Kristen, but, you know, it wasn't a defeat, as we all know. I hope the rebellion will soon be put down. We received your kind letter of the 8th on the 16th and read it with great interest. So she writes this letter to him, you know, very worried and anxious about him, and understandably so, because of, you know, hearing about the Battle of Antietam. And then, let's see, did I get my, okay. So then the next letter I have in this series is a letter written by Sergeant Dinsmore himself. He writes this letter on October 15th, 1862, and it says, "Camp near Sharpsburg, Maryland. Humphrey's division was camped on the Grove Farm." Many of you have probably seen that. That's where the photographs with Lincoln and Fitzjohn Porter were taken, the beautiful brick house in the background. The fields around the Grove Farm are full of soldiers, including the 5th Corps and the 134th Pennsylvania. And so this is where this letter is written from on October 15th, 1862. And Harvey writes to his brother a number of things, including, he said, "You may know I greet letters from home with a smile. I received one from Chrissy dated 21st of September, which is that letter I just showed you." And I just love, because there's not too often you see this interaction of the home front letters to the soldiers. And I think that's really cool that he mentions that he got this letter from her. And he says, well, Henry, I'm just kind of jumping to the better things here. Well, Henry, I expect all you are kept busy. If I had nothing to do here, I would go home and help you to husk corn 2 or 3 days anyway. But Uncle Samuel has not quite through digging taters yet. For that reason, I cannot leave yet. And I love that agricultural reference. You know, I'm still here working for Uncle Sam, and the great reference to Uncle Sam, to Uncle Samuel. I'm digging taters for him, so I can't go home and help you husk corn. And then the coolest thing to me is, well, before that, we are just like, he says, another agricultural reference here. We are just like a lot of hogs penned up about this time of year, only quite not so much feed, and we're a little closer penned. So he's complaining about the fact that they're in close camp quarters there. The rations may not be that great. But, you know, Lincoln reviews the troops on the Grove Farm, and Dinsmore sees this. And this is a great paragraph. Harvey writes to his brother Henry, well, Henry, old Uncle Abraham Lincoln made us a call the other day. He looks just like another man and rides a horse not quite as good as my own. Saddle and bridle just about the same. If I could get a stovepipe hat and get on old Fran, I could go to Washington anyhow. So this small d Democratic, right? I saw the president. He doesn't ride a very good horse. We got a horse at home just about as good, man. I should get a stovepipe hat and I could be a president, you know? And so, you know, you think there might be this, oh, I was awed by seeing President Lincoln. Not this guy. You know, he's like, his horses are that great and his saddle and bridle are about like the one I have at home. So this great sort of vision you can get of this guy watching Lincoln ride by and kind of forming this opinion. And there's other quotes by soldiers about how ungainly Lincoln looked when he was riding his horse. So that's interesting as well. So continuing in the series of interactions between the Dinsmore family and at the home and on the home front and Harvey at the front, there are these two passes, and I absolutely love these things. This is the first pass is dated December 26, 1862. And it says, Mr. Henry Dinsmore has permission to visit the Army of the Potomac and take with him a box of clothing, subject to approval of the commanding general by order of the Secretary of War. And then it's signed off by Chauncey McKeever, Assistant Adjutant General. So there's this pass. Henry's coming to the front to see his brother, and he gets this pass in Washington City to continue on to the front. And the second pass is dated the next day, December 27th. The bearer, Henry Dinsmore, has permission to pass from Aquia Creek to Falmouth. This is where the 134th Pennsylvania was camped at the time for the purpose of visiting the Army. Pass will expire December 27th. They don't give him much time, by the command of Brigadier General Marcina Patrick, Provost Marshal General, and then it's signed off on by one of the clerks of the Provost Marshal Office. So I think these two passes are really cool. You know, by themselves, they'd be neat. As part of this family thread, I think they're really cool because the reason Henry one of the reasons Henry is coming there is to pick up the body of Harvey Dinsmore. Harvey Dinsmore died of disease in Falmouth on December 4th, 1862. And of course, you know, it took the family some time to get notified this, but he died in camp on December 4th. And so what Henry is actually doing is journeying there to get his brother's body and presumably bringing a suit of clothes to put, you know, maybe if the guy's exhumed or who knows what exactly. But the next thing I have in this series of interactions is this label for the Adams Express Company, of course, the UPS or FedEx of its time, dated January 1st, 1863, overwriting the two, one corpse, marked George McKean, body of H.M. Dinsmore, headed to Enon Station, Pennsylvania. And you know, oops, going back to that, that's just really, you know, there's a little Civil War tragedy, right, in microcosm. You know, Kristen is not going to get her brother back, and Henry is not going to get his brother back as well. And you know, Harvey joined up for 9 months, and you know, didn't survive, died of disease. So this, you know, I just like the stories that these documents tell, you know, I just consider really priceless. And then one last paper item related to the 134th Pennsylvania is this letter I have from a soldier by the name of Anderson Shannon. And of course I had the text of that laying around here. And now it's buried under other stuff I brought out to show. Here it is. This letter is written August 17th, 1862 from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I have a number of other 134th letters in, you know, they're interesting, but the reason I like this is because like is maybe not the right word, but his name is Henderson Shannon, and he is from Butler County, Pennsylvania, and he writes his mother this letter telling about camp life outside of Harrisburg as the regiment is organizing. And it's full of camp rumors and camp gossip. And he talks about how, well, I'll just read you this one paragraph. Last night there were 6 men poisoned on guard duty, and I heard since then that 4 of them are dead. The fellow came along with water in the inside of camp and told them that he was sent around to water the guards. As soon as they drank it, they commenced to vomit and could not stand. And so he talks about this mini riot that breaks out as they go trying to find this guy that supposedly had bad water. And he concludes and says, it is almost as dangerous here as it is down in Virginia. Well, he will die of disease in Frederick, Maryland. He never sees action, and he's at Antietam, and he dies after the Battle of Antietam, and he's buried at the Antietam National Cemetery. And so I've gone and visited his grave a number of times, and you think, you know, not every soldier saw a lot of glory or could tell his grandchildren about the battles he participated in. This guy never saw action and died of disease in Frederick, Maryland, and is buried at Antietam. And his in Samuel Bates regimental history, and also on his tombstone, his name is wrong. It is Anderson Shannon, but his actual name is Henderson. So he dies of disease, and he lies under a mismarked headstone in the Antietam National Cemetery. So I go pay him a visit every once in a while because, you know, otherwise he would be one of the forgotten 700 and some thousand, right, that perished during this war. So I'm going to go back to stopping share for just a minute because I want to show you a couple other items I have related to the 134th Pennsylvania, and then we'll move on and take a look at some of the photographs I have. This is I love this. This is the reunion ribbon I was telling you about for the 134th Pennsylvania. I think it's a smashing looking ribbon from 1892, Company B. So it just in great shape. Ken Turner sold me this at the Mansfield show many, many years ago. And on the other side, we see the regimental colonel, Edward O'Brien, in this really cool etching. It's just such a clean, you know, ribbon, and has such great information on it. And so again, you know, I just love this connection with the regiment, and have no evidence that my great-grandfather was at this reunion, but I like to think he was wearing one of these types of ribbons. So forgive me while I turn my back here. But this is way too big to show you to get details, but I have a soldier's memorial for the 134th Pennsylvania for Company H, and Harvey Dinsmore is listed on here, died December 4th, 1862. But I just love this, this hand tinning on here. The Capitol dome wasn't finished yet. I don't know if you could see that, but the illustrator has sort of distorted the Capitol dome and made it much taller and narrower than it's going to be in reality, because they don't really know what it's going to look like when it's finished. So again, a nice little rare survivor of the 134th Pennsylvania that I keep hanging on my wall. Let me grab a quick drink. This is water, although this is I would much rather have it filled with some other adult beverage at this time, but it's just water. Let's see here. Okay. Let's go back to share screen and here we go. Go back to the PowerPoint and take a look at some of the other images in my collection. And I don't really have, some of the stellar collections that images that many of you have, but I'll show you some of the ones that are my favorite. I recently picked up this Sargent, and the reason I bought it is because I just thought the tinning was gorgeous. It just almost feels like luminescent the way it's tinted, and it has a three-dimensional quality to it almost, the way he kind of pops off that backdrop. And supposedly this is a Camp Distribution Virginia backdrop, and you can see he's got veteran stripes on. And I don't know his name, but I just think it's so handsomely tinted. And, this guy has served a number of years, and he's, seen, possibly a lot of fighting. I'm not sure, but for me, this is one of my first purchases. It has the Robert Carruthers has a nice backdrop, but this one does as well. And I like the fact it's identified, and I really like the tinning on this image as well. And then, sorry for popping around like that. Getting back to a little bit of a local interest here. These are not any kind of spectacular carte de visites, but these were all taken by a man named Shunk, who took them in Sandy Hook, Maryland, which is very close to where I live. And it's with apologies to anyone that may live there, it's a pretty rundown place today. It was a very small town before the Civil War, but it's very close to Harper's Ferry. Basically, it's down the Potomac River on the Maryland side. And it was part of that big Harper's Ferry military metropolis. There was a hospital there. There was a big cavalry camp there. There were a lot of guys stationed there. And this Shunk was not a photographer. He's only a photographer for 2 years. And so he just kind of pops up out of nowhere, moves there, and starts taking photographs. And it shows you how explosive photography is at that time. And also, how the entrepreneurship of guys. For some reason, and I got to dig more into Shunk, but I believe he actually enlists in the Potomac Home Brigade later in the war, and he doesn't really finish out. And after the war, I can't seem to find any record of him as a photographer. So, dig more into Shunk, but I believe. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. But so I just like how, it kind of illustrates the rapid expansion of these local towns and how invested they become with soldiers. This guy's in the 5th New York Heavy Artillery as well. He's identified. I don't really have it here. I'm wondering if this guy might be a hospital steward. I'm not sure. Maybe not, but it's just a possibility, certainly. This guy, I like him because he's taken a light artillery mounted services jacket. He's cut down the collar, stuck a couple buttons on there. He's got a pinky ring on. So he's sort of a fashion plate. He's ready to go out and carouse, I guess. So that's kind of cool because of the connection, to the local area as well. And I'm always looking for bee shunk back marks because of that, because I want to learn more about that situation and try to, put more of his story together and acquire some of those images. And again, the images themselves are not that great, but it's just the story behind them, of this town. I picked up this image from Kevin Canberg, and this looks a lot like the first Minnesota images that were taken at Poolsville. It's not identified, but it's sort of an impulse buy at last June's Gettysburg show. I just really like the look on his face, the strong, hardy hat, the tassels coming off the side of the brim here, the scales, and of course the American flag backdrop. And, a lot of those first Minnesota images taken at Poolsville pretty much look like this. So I can't say that it is, but it's certainly, and this is what is this? This is a quarter plate. Yeah. So, that's one of my, it's one of my images that I always like to look at, kind of gaze at. And then, let's see, well, we're running out of time, running faster than I thought. Anyway, let me move to, I also have a collection of civilian images, and I wanted to show you some of those because I really like those too. And I think of all the images in my collection, this is probably technically the nicest one I have. This is a half plate, and it's extraordinary, and it could be civilian or military. But I saw this on Mike Medhurst's site, and after quite a while of paying it off, I got it home, and I'm not disappointed by it. It's just fantastic. And I can't imagine how they got all those people to stay as still as they did. And the baby is moving, but not too bad. You can still make out the baby's features. But the tinting on this is extraordinary. And there's just, again, this fantastic, it's an ambro, luminescent quality to it. I love the looks on their faces. This is obviously a well-to-do family in New York City. I thought maybe he was 1850s Red Army officer stationed at one of the forts there or something, but someone commented when I put this on Civil War Faces, the uniform doesn't match the 1850s regs, and I'm not that familiar with those, that he might be a militia officer, which is fine with me. I don't have any problem with that at all. And this wide collar, my wife Heidi, I should say, just quickly, she's director of the DAR Museum in DC. She has a really great collection of civilian images. She's collected photographs longer than I have, but she knows dress detail very well. And this wide collar is 1850s. So it's somewhere in there. And, maybe this guy went on to serve in the Civil War. It's possible maybe to identify him. We know where it was taken, at the studio of T.S. Jube in the Bowery, 83 Bowery. Maybe you can track down, you look in the New York papers or militia, notices or something. Maybe you may be able to find out who this guy is. I don't know if I'll ever get around to it. I just appreciate it for what it is itself. And every once in a while, I will take it out to in natural light. I know you really shouldn't do that, but when you take it out in a gentle natural light, the colors just blow up in this thing, and it's just really cool, especially the green in this little girl's dress. It's just like, wow, whoever tinted this knew what they were doing. I know we're supposed to end at 7:30. We start a little late. I'm going to push it to I think 7:40. And man, I got all this other stuff I'm not going to get to talk to, but that's okay. Talk about it. It went quicker than I thought. I love outdoor views as well, outdoor photographic views. This is Stuyvesant, New York on the Hudson River. I just really like this. And if I could zoom in onto it, the detail you can find out, here's a kid with a dog. The guy standing at the back of this wagon has one leg, and he's using a crutch. You can kind of just make out the crutch there. Stuyvesant was a Hudson River port. There's a lot of traffic up and down the Hudson River on cargo boats. And in the back, you can see the double masts of one of those Hudson River cargo boats pulled up along here. And you see this cheap cash store. What's it say? I think, well, this says stoves. Oh, this is a name. I can't read it though. This says Lumberyard. This is another name of the owner of this. And over here, this says Tinware. There's the railroad guard that prevent people from going across when a train is coming. And this is like, I think it's an 1850s, 60s image. It's not post-war. Beautiful Greek revival on front on this particular building with those Americanized columns that you never see in the ancient world. These are those square columns that, you know, were sort of a quick substitute for what's the proper round columns, you know, and you just get this great sense of this sort of bustling little port in Stuyvesant, New York. And none of this is there anymore. There's a river park at this location actually now. And it's just one of these things that you can zoom in and just kind of get lost in the details. Man, I wish I could see what's underneath this overhang because there's stuff in there, but you can't. But really cool. And this guy sitting at the side door is an older guy. Just great details of what I think is pre-Civil War America. This is another one I really like. This is a 6-plate of a team of oxen, obviously. I think it's New England because of the stone wall, that round rubbly stone, or upstate New York. And gosh, the people are going to kill me, but I was actually, this plow was identified. The manufacturer of this plow was identified. It's a cast iron plow. I can't for the life of me remember the name of it, but it's, you can, a plow expert basically looked at this on another forum and said, oh, it was manufactured in New York. And you just get the sense this is a pretty proud father, a farmer, and his son going out for the first day of plowing in the spring with their newly purchased cast iron plow. And it's also cool because oxen stick around longer in the north. Mules begin to take over in the southern United States, but oxen remain in favor. And I believe, I'm going to make a big guess here, that these are red Devon oxen because they're a uniform color. They look about the right size, and red Devon are a staple New England oxen. And if you go to places like Old Sturbridge Village, you'll see them there. They're really cool. I think Mount Vernon and Williamsburg also has red Devons. I like occupationals. This is probably my best occupational. 2 carpenters, and this is probably 1870s, I think. But there's just these guys are cocky, right? They're proud of themselves. I love this big straw hat on this guy. This is a framing square. He's got a small roofing or shingling hatchet in his hand here. Of course, this is a saw in the other fellow's hand, and I believe this is a roofing or shingling hatchet he's holding as well. So I'm imagining these are house builders because of those tools. And I just, you know, the problem with occupationals is that they go pretty fast and on the market. And then this is a quarter plate image I have. And this is really, I think it's unique. And there's a date on the inside of the case, August 31st, 1862. Same day as the Battle of Second Manassas. Now, presuming that case has been with this image the entire time, you know, who are these guys? Are they connected with the military at all? There's nothing that says that they are. They obviously, are they Teamsters? Whatever. But regardless, I don't care if they're connected with the military. I just think it's a fantastic study. They're wearing these sort of overshirts, you know, for working. The looks they have on their faces, their hats are just incredible. And they're passing a flask. And this is a Bennington pottery flask. The Bennington pottery in Bennington, Vermont, made a lot of items for household use in 19th century America, including these fake books that had screw-off caps that could hold I say alcohol, liquid at least, of some sort. And they're passing this Bennington pottery book flask around, and that's just layers of American history there, and the looks on their faces are incredible. They're probably a lot older than we think. These guys probably are no older than their 40s, and that's my guess anyway. But I have to tell you that I still do living history for some time, and I'm actually making one of these working man shirts because I just thought this image was so cool. I'm like, I gotta have one of those shirts to wear around. So I'm making something really similar to this, which is sort of how sometimes this collecting business affects you, right, in different ways. So we're coming close to the end here, but I want to talk about one other thing in my collection, and then I will let you go. And this is another letter. I'm also a big fan of Ulysses S. Grant, and I'll show you very, very quickly, and I'll let you off the hook here. I don't have a lot of Grant stuff, but I love this ribbon. I know we're not in full screen view, but I have this really pristine ribbon that was given out to people that attended the dedication of his tomb in New York City on August 8th, 1885, and it's in great shape. This is a celluloid center in the middle of it with the details of Grant's life. And then I have this Grant engraving that hangs on my wall that was found in this frame. The glass, I think, is original. The engraving itself needed some restoration, and it did get some, and I bought it off a friend of mine. But what I love about this is he's not really portrayed very well, because Grant became so famous so quickly out east. A lot of people didn't exactly know what he looked like, and the engraver didn't do a great job with this. His chin's a little short and everything, but I just this is a Courier and Ives, and it's a wartime piece. After he became lieutenant general, but they might have used an earlier engraving and just changed the shoulder straps. Regardless, I love this piece because I'm a big Grant fan, and that's why I want to end on this letter that I have, dated May 22nd, 1864. This, I think, is a really unique letter, and it tells a story as well. It was written by a soldier named Roy, and of course, this is in the middle of the Overland Campaign. And so he starts this letter on May 22nd, 1864, near Milford Station, Virginia. And he mentioned Spotsylvania, and we're getting reinforcements out of the forts in Washington, he mentions. It's like really cool detail. And I don't know his last name, but he mentions a Lieutenant Granger. And I can't remember what corps this is. It goes through Milford Station, but I can find out pretty quickly. So there's a chance he could track down, who I'm going to do all this research. I don't know. But what's cool about it is this stain here. So he starts this on May 22nd. He sticks this in his pocket, and he pulls it out on May 25th to finish it. He's writing it to his mom and dad, his dear mother and father. And he says, P.S. This sheet of paper I put in my pocket and sweat it through, Roy. He's apologizing for this sweat stain in the letter. That's like Overland Campaign DNA, man. I'm just like, wow. This guy's got it, presumably maybe in the pocket of his sack coat or something, or wherever, and he's sweating, marching, and he sweats through this paper, and it stained it. So that's cool. And then also cool is this fantastic description of Grant that he puts in here. He sees Grant, and he writes, "We all have great confidence in our lieutenant general. Our men think he just knows his business. I have a chance to see him most every day. He is a very small man and rides a little coal-black horse, much larger than the nag you sold." Now, what is it with these guys and comparing horses back home, right? "He don't have a string of staff following him of 100 men. His staff is 1 brigadier general, 2 lieutenant colonels, and 7 or 8 captains. General Grant wears an old slouched hat, pants stuck in his boots, his dress coat all dirty, and a flannel shirt with a white collar, as most major generals do. He is not a man that puts on any airs at all." And I'm like, that's just a fantastic eyewitness description of Grant, and I love it. And So stop share again. I've pushed it well now. I've talked at least for an hour, I'm pretty sure. I thank Doug York again for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank all of you that watched the whole or part of this. It allowed me to share some of the my small collection. And as I describe it, I have a meager collection, but I've had a lifelong major interest in the 19th century and the Civil War period. And I hope to expand this collection as I move forward. And you know, hopefully I'll stay employed with Civil War Times magazine and I can make some money so I can do that. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening and the rest of your weekend. Thanks a lot. This is Dana Shoaf signing off from the room in my house near Middletown, Maryland.